Here is another chess game. Going to begin with the king pawns up 2. Great opening. I marked the pawn red. It does block the queen, but a little bit better of a move would be with the knight. Put the knight here instead. You can see that the knight is attacking the queen, but pawn was used instead. King moves up. I've mentioned in other videos, it's best just to move the 2 central pawns, the ones in front of the queen and the king, rather than moving all of the pawns on the outside. Keeping the pawns together in flanks, like you can see here that black has, just makes the fortress and the defense a lot stronger. Plus, it leaves this pawn unprotected, which black takes advantage of, and just takes a piece for free. 2 things here. There's a saying in chess that knights on the rim are grim. And what that means is a knight on the edge of the board isn't nearly as powerful as it is in the middle of the board. So right here, the knight only controls 4 squares. Whereas if you had a knight in the middle of the board, it could potentially control 8 squares. So again, knights on the rim are grim. They're just not very powerful when they're put off to the side. And as you can see, there's an unprotected piece right here. Now black has a really nifty move in this position. If black were to move the queen here to c6, it would set up a fork between the 2 unprotected pieces. If, let's say, white were to protect or go ahead and attack the bishop with a pawn, leaving the queen to protect the knight, then black could put a check on the king, which would need to be defended in some way, and which would allow the bishop then to escape. Instead, black moves the knight up to c6. I marked that move red. It was good for black to protect the bishop, but putting it at this particular square blocks it behind a pawn. A better place to move that knight would have been either here to a5 or here to e7. It is true that the queen blocks the bishop, but the queen can move pretty quickly, as opposed to this pawn right here, which is hemmed in by the white pawn. But black moves there. Again, just one of these crazy pawn moves. It just leaves the pawn out in the open and vulnerable, and as you can see, it's unprotected. And white doesn't take the unprotected piece, which I'm kind of surprised, but that would have made it an even game. Instead, white moves to b3, which is not a very strong move because black has an attack on that knight on a4. And by moving the queen here, black just simply captures the white knight and is now ahead, I believe, by 4 points. I'm not keeping track. White recaptures. That was kind of a strange move because black just gave white a free piece and white took advantage of it. So make sure that when you make a piece, you think about what your opponent's next move might be so that you don't give them free pieces like this move right here. You can see there's an unprotected piece right there at a7. White doesn't. Again, another unprotected piece there at c7. And the rook is also unprotected as well. So that could create a little bit of a mess right there for black, but white doesn't take it. Let's see. Okay, so this is pretty interesting right here. White captures black's pawn. Black decided to put another attack on the rook, but do you see a big thing here for white? Black left the rook unprotected, and white could easily just take that rook and be way ahead in this game. Plus, the king would be in check. Black could block the check, but white is now way ahead in this game. So what white does instead is white moves here to b3, and we have something in chess called more attackers than defenders. But here it's actually pretty even. Black has 2 pieces attacking white's rook, and white has 2 pieces defending the rook. Now, if you look at this position, black has the opportunity to capture white's rook. What would be a better piece for black to capture with, the bishop or the rook? The answer is the bishop. And the reason why is that the bishop is worth less points than the rook. So if the bishop captures the rook, it's 3 points. And then if white decides to recapture, the exchange is 5-3, and black wins the exchange. What black did instead was capture with the rook, which is worth 5 points. And then if white were to recapture, it would be 5-5. And then if black recaptured, it would be 8-5. Then white recaptures 8-8, and everything evens out. What white did instead, so black captured the rook, white moved the queen out of the way. So essentially, white just gave black 5 points for nothing. So as you are playing your chess games, think about the point values and think about what you may be giving up by not capturing your opponent's pieces. White takes an unprotected piece that may actually seem like it's a pretty good idea, but it's actually not a very good idea. And the reason why, there's 2 things. First of all, white has an unprotected piece. So even though white took a 1-point unprotected piece, black could capture a 3-point unprotected piece and win the exchange. Black actually does a pretty good move. And even though black doesn't take that bishop, black moves the rook to c6, attacking black's queen. It's a really nice in-between move. White's going to have to move the queen out of the way so that it doesn't get captured, and white can't capture the black rook because it's being protected by the black queen. So when white moves out of the way, then black can go ahead and take that unprotected piece. It's called an in-between move, and I think it's a really nice idea that black had there. For some reason, white captured a pawn and left the queen open to be taken for free. And so black took it and got a scalp for that. And I'm just surprised at how many chess players give up their queens for free in games. And it's why I give away scalps, because I just want chess players to be aware that their opponents are constantly leaving their queens unprotected and vulnerable in the games, and it's really easy to take advantage of those. So here is a position where white has 2 unprotected pieces, a bishop on a6 and a bishop on c1. Which one of those unprotected pieces do you think would be the better one to take? The answer is the bishop on c1. And the reason why is that it captures a piece and puts a tempo on the king. And a tempo means that you are forcing your opponent to move a piece. So black captures the bishop, puts a tempo on the king. White has to make a move that it really doesn't want to make, and that move is queen to e2. Now, there is a forced checkmate in this position. And if you notice that your opponent's king is out in the open, try being really relentless with putting that piece in, attacking that piece and putting it in check, because there's a good possibility, if you're very careful, that you can force your opponent into checkmate. And that is one of these positions right here. You can see that white has an unprotected bishop, but by capturing that piece, it also puts the king in check. Now, this is not what happened in the game, but I want you to start thinking about these kinds of things as you play your games. So the queen captures the bishop, puts the king in check. King can't go down to the bottom rank because of the electric fence put on by the black rook. So the king has to move out of the way. Now there's a lot of different possibilities. I'm just going to use the computer and show you. So it suggests king moving to e3. So now that the king is open, you could still put the king in check, but actually getting the other pieces out into the game now is going to put more pressure on that king. I'm going to put the knight right here in this position. Now you can put the king in check. And again, we're going to start putting these relentless checks on the king. King is in check, so then the king is going to put an attack on. As you can see, there's an unprotected piece, so the rook is now going to capture that unprotected piece. And when you put an opponent's king in check, you can do a lot of forks and discovered attacks and find unprotected pieces and just really have a lot of fun. Best move, it says here, for white is to move up 2. And again, you're going to want to be relentless. So keep attacking that king. It says knight to f4 right here. Put the king in check again. King has no choice but to move right there. Put the king in check again. There's only one way to stop it, by putting it right there. And then queen take e2, checkmate, right there. But let's see how this ended up really in the game. So here, black didn't even capture any of white's pieces. White moves up 2. I'm just going to do some basic moves here. You can see that black just won the exchange, 2 pawns for 1 pawn. And I couldn't quite figure this out. Black took the unprotected piece, but left their queen wide open so that the white knight could take the queen for free. And I'm amazed at how many times chess players might take an opponent's queen for free and then in a few more moves give their queen up for free. Well, in this particular game, this is all the further that the chess players took the game, and then they stopped. I think Chess Club ran out, and they ran out of time. So again, either side could have taken a big advantage of the other, but didn't do it. So remember, these things are constantly going on in your games. Keep your eyes open, and hopefully you'll start seeing them and winning more chess games.